beginning of the build out.
Good seeing you. Pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Okay, hey, welcome back. So in the last video, we vectorized this image. We took it from a file that we pulled offline and made it into a vector file. And so now I'm going to go through digitizing it. So the first thing we want to do, because remember we have just like a bunch of shapes overlapping each other, you're going to select everything. You're going to go to your pathfinder and you're going to select trim. What trim does is it basically like does a cookie cutter type of thing. So look, if I select this yellow and pull it out, you see that it cut out this shape. This way when you embroider it, you don't have overlapping stitches. Another thing we have to consider real fast is our size, like what exactly this is being embroidered on. So I just did Command G to group it. Actually, let me ungroup it. And let's see. You're gonna hit transform. You're gonna make sure these are proportional. And let's just do like 3 inches high. So there we go, 3 inches high. And now we can begin digitizing because we have our individual shapes, and so that way when we digitize, our stitches won't be really dense from overlapping so much. So similarly to how we did the vectorizing, we're going to work from back to front. And that's typically how you're supposed to work when you're doing digitizing, because first you lay your underlays and your background, and then you go to your foreground. It's kind of like you're painting almost. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do this yellow. So with this yellow, it's a big space, it's a background space, so I'm not going to be using a run stitch, a steel stitch, or a satin stitch or column stitch, because it won't really make sense to do that, just because it's just a kind of like a background area. So I'm going to do a complex fill. I don't know if I don't think I've introduced complex fill yet. Complex fill just basically lays down lines and lines and lines of stitches in the background. So if I go to the 3D view, that's what it looks like. The machine will literally run from left to right, just stitching in that yellow area that you see there. I'm going to go to pattern. I'm going to select smooth just because that's my favorite pattern. I feel like it looks the cleanest. For underlay, I like to do a lattice underlay on all my complex fills, because that kind of puts down a stitch that stabilizes the material before you fill it in. Commands, I just like to put trims. Even though it does slow down the machine, I just like to put in trims just so the machine just does it automatically and you don't really have to worry about it. Lock stitches I don't really play with too much. Usually the machine does everything. It ties in automatically. Complex fill effects. Yeah, complex fill is very simple. I don't touch the density because the density on this is just fine. So this is what we have now. We have this background yellow. So we want to keep working up. So the next thing I'm going to do is the bat in the center, just because I kind of want to do the center first and then do the outline last. So this bat also is not really something that I would use a satin stitch on, just because you have all these weird angles and curves. So if you did put a satin, it wouldn't really look too good, because you'd have to put in a bunch of cuts everywhere to make it work. So what I'm going to do is just do a complex fill on this too. And similarly, I'm going to do smooth again. And put a lattice underlay. And then I also like to put a little bit of pole composition. So what that does is it makes the stitch go a little bit outside of like its predicted area, just so you have like a little bit of overlap, and that tiny bit of overlap is gonna keep your stitches maybe I'll bring it down to like 103%. It's just gonna make sure that when you have your stitches, it's not gonna be like, it's not gonna really be a mess, you know what I mean? Like, you're not gonna have gaps in between. And one final thing that I wanted to do was put in my trims. And I forgot, I also wanted to add a contour underlay to this. And I want to do that to only to my black one, because that way we can see the space between them. So for some reason there's like this piece being digitized too. I'm not sure why that's happening. Just let me see. I guess that's because of the pole composition. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're not gonna include that pole on this one. For some reason it's going out like that. Typically when I do that it doesn't, but in this case we see that we don't have any gaps, and that looks pretty nice, pretty tight. Okay, and so the last thing we're going to want to do is do an auto satin path on the outline, because it's just an oval, so it's going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to make it parallel underlay. So here is where we really want to add the pole composition, just so there's not a gap between the outline and the complex fill itself. And lastly, I'm going to put in my trims. Put in my trims. Okay, and let's look at the 3D result. So there it is, not bad. So as you can see, we started with a plain raster image. We first vectorized it, and then we digitized it. Whenever you digitize, there's always going to be a little bit of trial and error, but when you finally figure it out, it looks pretty good. So there's the final result. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do another one of these, maybe with a more complex logo, just to really solidify the process. But essentially all it is you start with a plain logo, you vectorize it, and then working back to front, after you vectorize it, you're ready to digitize it, and then you just have to consider the best type of stitch to use in each component of the design, and same thing, you work back to front. A main thing of it is practice, and as you get more experience working with different types of logos, you'll understand what to do in each different situation. So that's all for this video. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more. Goodbye.